Today's video is presented in partnership with Hampson Auctions, one of the UK's leading classic, performance and supercar auction houses. Their next sale takes place on the 9th of March at the magnificent Bolesworth Castle in Cheshire.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Rich Reviews, and you now join us 10 days later in our Lotus Emira, driving some of our best country Cotswolds roads, 10 days after collecting the car from Ryland Lotus Bristol, after having the last two issues resolved or re-resolved, whichever way you look at it. And 10 days after having collected the car, it's now a good time to give you an overview of exactly how all the issues are faring up after being resolved, and of course those final two issues. Are those issues resolved? Now, the first issue we had was with the climate control, and this showed itself by the fan being either fully on or fully off, and this was caused by water ingress to the resistor pack, and this was resolved by the replacement of the resistor pack. And to resolve this issue, Lotus Ryland Bristol put a membrane under the front cover, and this prevented water from ingressing again, so it mitigates that problem occurring again. And a lot of people have had these resistor packs replaced, but because they never had that membrane fitted, they've had to have another resistor pack replaced again later on because it's failed again. So that hopefully is the final solution or resolution to that problem now. The second issue was also with the climate control, but was with the front fascia panel of the climate control. And this is where the buttons were very sticky and very hard to move. And Ryland Bristol resolved this by fitting a whole new front fascia panel, and that has now resolved that problem. So those buttons are now nice and smooth to turn, no problems whatsoever. And the third issue was with regards to the SOS warning system, the SOS Emergency Services system. And this was whereby we had an SOS warning coming up all the time when we were in the car. And the SOS warning in effect was telling you to take the car back to your Lotus dealership for the issue to be resolved. This was resolved by a firmware update because in effect the error wasn't reporting the correct details. What it should have been reporting is that reduced functionality or reduced capabilities available from the SOS Emergency Services system. And this was caused, or this SOS error resulted because the SOS system has a SIM, because it communicates with the telecoms network, and in effect the telecom system of the SOS system could not see the telecoms network. And this could be simply because you've had the car in the garage overnight and it just hasn't got telecoms access. Another part to that could be, or another reason for causing that SOS error could be because the 5-volt backup battery is depleted, and that's resolved simply by driving the car. Now you could charge that battery up also by just turning the ignition on, but the better way is to drive the car, because nobody wants to just turn the ignition on and leave the ignition on in the garage, on the car in the garage, say for example, with the car not starting. Of course you're not going to leave the car started. That has now been resolved by the latest firmware update, putting the newer message in, so it no longer reports that issue. So that's fine, that's been resolved. Now the next issue was with regards the front parking sensors showing ghost obstacles. In effect, the front parking sensors were warning all the time, saying that there was obstacles in front of the car, much like I was parking too close, or I was parked very close to a car in front, or there was an obstacle in front. This was very simply resolved just by refitting the front number plate lower down on its plinth. Simply, the front number plate was fitted slightly too high, and it was causing an obstacle to the parking sensors. It was blocking the parking sensors' sight, or sight of vision if you like. So this was resolved simply by the front number plate being fitted lower down. So beware of that, guys. Make sure that your front number plates aren't fitted too high. That's very important. Now the next issue was with regards to the electronic parking brake, and this is whereby when the electronic parking brake automatically applied itself, sometimes when pulling away it wouldn't release, but this was very, very rare this occurred, and it wouldn't release to such an extent that the car stalled, which is obviously quite an important problem. This was resolved by the parking system, the electronic parking brake, being reconfigured, and to enable that you needed the latest firmware to provide access to the interface to configure the parking brake system. So that was partly resolved by the new firmware update, and then that enabled them access in to reconfigure the parking brake system. And that seems to have been resolved now, so I won't really know until it occurs again, or if it doesn't occur again. I just hope that it doesn't occur again. But that was such a rare occurrence anyway, it was just an annoying factor. Then the next issue was with regards, I know it seems like I'm going on again, the next issue. The next issue was with regards the door wind noise, and the door wind noise was noticed predominantly around motorway speed. And this was resolved firstly by the car being partly adjusted, then it went in to be checked again, which is what one of the last checks before, and then it had to be snugged up a little bit more to be able to resolve that problem, and then that's resolved. And the next issue was with regards the engine cover bubbling, and this is what's called osmosis. So the engine cover had paint bubbling on it, and this noticeably noted on other cars, or mostly noted I should say, on other cars on the doors. So it's very rare for it to occur on the engine cover, but in my situation it occurred on the engine cover. This was resolved by the whole engine cover being replaced. So when it went in for that long stage, it was about a week and a half, Lotus replaced the engine cover, so a whole new engine cover was brought in, and I showed you that when we visited the workshop, and Lotus Ryland Bristol kindly provided us that access to show all the bits and pieces that were laid out at the workshop. Just got to turn the car around now, come to a situation where the road's ended. This was fitted and it came in pre-sprayed. Now I've had the situation where other people have contacted me and said, oh, what happened with your car being painted? It never had to be painted. The paint that the engine cover came in sprayed at, it was fully sprayed, fully completed, finally prepped, and that paint colour was a very good match for the rest of the car. So no problems, just fitting the new engine cover and transferring over the vents from the old engine cover to the new one. It was good that they were able to transfer over those vents because they'd been PPF'd, which meant just the lower vents had to be re-PPF'd, and Lotus kindly paid for those lower vents to be re-PPF'd, so it went back to Topaz in Bristol to have those lower vents PPF'd, paid for by Lotus, so very good of them. And the next issue was quite a bizarre issue, and that was the supercharger blow-off valve thread bar, and this thread bar had been snapped when it went for service just before I collected the car. So the thread bar was intact when we tested the car, when we checked the car out, but when we actually bought the car, when we picked it up, the thread bar had been broken, and therefore it'd been broken when it went for service before I collected the car. Now Lotus said initially this would require a whole new supercharger at an extortionate cost of £10,000, which is absolutely ludicrous, of course. And this was finally resolved by Ryland Lotus Bristol communicating with Lotus and getting them to send 2 new thread bars. And of course they only needed to use one, and I believe it only took about half an hour to replace that thread bar. So from £10,000 cost probably down to about £1.50, something like that. So yeah, crazy that was going to cost 10 grand. So let's just see what the Lotus turns around like. We're just going to pop the car around here. Got some weird roadworks going on here, so we're having to navigate around these roadworks at the moment. It is what it is, as they say.
You're looking to buy a supercar or sports car? We can help you. Rich Reviews makes the luxury car buying process simple and stress-free. Whether you're looking to buy your first supercar or add a car to your collection, our services include expert telephone support calls, pre-purchase inspection and car collection videos. Rich Reviews takes care of all the details so you can just sit back and enjoy a hassle-free purchase process. But don't just take our word for it, check out some of the testimonials from our customers below. Contact us today via the comments below or at the following email address. Thank you for your time.
So the final issue, the 9th issue, was the windscreen. When the windscreen had been fitted, it had been snagged at the top, and that caused a split that got worse and worse, and it navigated its way down to where the rear view mirror was on the inner panel. Now the windscreen is made up of 2 panes of glass sandwiched together, and it was the inner pane that had got split, and it then traversed horizontally across the side of the windscreen, and the split was getting a lot worse as I drove the car. So that had to be resolved. That was quite urgent because we didn't want the whole windscreen splitted. We didn't want that whole split going horizontally across the whole windscreen of the car. This was resolved by a whole new windscreen being fitted, and it was fitted extremely well, no problems whatsoever. Now, the glass in itself cost around £2,000, and this is quite expensive when you compare it to Ferraris. Ferraris are around £3,000 for that glass to be replaced. Now, £3,000 just for the glass. So that is quite a surprising cost. I didn't expect Lotus windscreen glass to cost as much as £2,000 just for the glass. And fitting the glass would have costed itself, I don't know, at least I would have said £300 or £400 to £500 just fitting the glass. So probably that cost overall to Lotus was around £2,500 just for the windscreen replacement. So that was quite substantial. Now, just to summarise the final two issues, after all those issues had been remediated by Bristol, there were still two outstanding issues that still existed, and that was with regards to door wind noise at motorway speed. There was still some wind noise, and also the situation with the climate control. Now, because the climate control hadn't worked properly before, they didn't really know if there was any further problems, so the car had to be driven for a while to understand if it was fully resolved. The issue that I was getting then after it had been resolved was that the temperature wasn't quite adjusting itself properly, so separating itself or turning on hot and cold wasn't quite right. It wasn't sensing the internal cabin temperature properly. So what happened there was the car went back into Ryland Lotus Bristol to have the door wind noise assessed again and to have the climate control looked at again, and the door wind noise was corrected by them snugging in the door a little bit more, which has now resolved the problem, and the climate control problem was resolved by fitting a new cabin sensor, so you could sense the temperature properly, and that's now been resolved too. So I can finally say now, guys, finally say all those 9 issues are now resolved so far, but I'm not expecting anything to come back. Maybe some more issues, but hopefully not. So now we're just enjoying the car, just driving and enjoying the car. What a beautiful car this is. So we're driving it around our Cotswolds country roads and just having a blast with the car, exactly what you're supposed to be doing with these stunningly beautiful and stunningly performant and agile sports cars. So let me know, guys, are you having any issues with your Lotus Emiras? If you are, we can help you because we have certain services that we can help support you in resolving those issues. So let me know in the comments below, or let me know by dropping me an email at info@richreviews.com. I'll put the email address on the screen. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the next video.